Hello, you are listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 best-selling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, definitely sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. Now, our guest today is the beautiful and powerful Robyn Howard. Robyn Howard is a soul influencer and co-founder of IbogaSoul Shamanic Healing. You can find out more about Robyn Howard and her wonderful work at her two websites, soullove.ca and ibogasoul.com. Welcome, Robyn Howard.
Hi, Catherine. Thank
I
you
was,
for having me.
of course, I was just listening to one of your meditations last night, and you have this beautiful voice, which is really great for guided meditations. That's another thing that Robyn does. Now, Robyn Howard, what was your experience helping your father transition to the other world? Will you share for our audience about that?
Absolutely, Catherine. Before I begin, I wanted to first honor all the ancestors of the land that we find ourselves on and all those who have come to pass by lighting this candle and honoring the fact that every moment can be a ceremony. So, for those who can see, we've lit this beautiful candle, which I will hold on my lap for the duration of this time together. Look at that lighting my face. So, Catherine, that's a really good question. Back in 2020, when we were all going through a very intense time across the entire globe, my father was diagnosed with ALS. And it was a very quick slide. He decided that after just under a year of living with this condition and his brain being intact, but his body completely failing him, which is funny because he actually always said, I never want to have Alzheimer's. I want to always have my brain intact. And essentially got his wish. I love you, Daddy-O. On June 1st, which is ALS Awareness Day, he decided that that would be the day to do a assisted suicide with a doctor's, guidance. And he was living in Ontario, Canada. So to put the story short, I had had some entryway training into how to connect with ancestors. And I was pregnant, 6 months pregnant with our second born, Eden. And what happened was the day that my dad passed, I set up a fire portal in their yard. Funny enough that, a few years prior, he had told my mom this would be a great place to die. Who knows? So he did. He passed away very beautifully in a ceremony that through this portal I had opened. And I said, Dad, I'm going to tell your mom and dad, I'm going to call on grandma and grandpa to come walk you home. So when the time came for what my dad, who was always a joker and a musician, he said, Dr. Death is here. My mom, my sister, and I surrounded him. My husband and her husband were there, my sister's husband. And we had a beautiful moment where even though the ALS had taken away his ability to even smile, he asked if we could all give him a kiss. He got it through somehow with the words were so hard to make. He said, I want you all three of my girls to give me a kiss. So we did. And what happened was he laughed. He smiled so beautifully. And then it was time for the medicine. And all that happened was he had a big yawn and closed his eyes. And I had my hand, I always have his thumbprint on my hand right here, my neck. And I said, Ancestors, please walk Dad home now. And the fire was to my right, right in front of him. And as I said this and had my head on his shoulder, I heard, Walk this way from the fire. Aerosmith, Steven Tyler. That's, of course, how my ancestors responded to my calling. So, how did I do this? Well, it was a process of grieving while still alive, of celebrating the life that we had together, the time we had together, and knowing full well that life continues. In my heart, I know that our ancestors are real, they will always support us. So, it's been a big support actually having my dad on the other side, knowing that I can always talk to him and I can always call out for help. Yeah.
That is a beautiful story. And years ago, ALS for our audience is also known as Lou Gehrig's disease. I worked with a lady who had Lou Gehrig's disease. And at the time that I worked with her, she was not able to speak. So I was really the perfect person to work with her because I could say, today you're feeling whatever, and then she could nod her head and so
Oh,
yeah, so it was a way for her to communicate.
that's
But
beautiful.
yes. Now, Robyn Howard, you are the co-founder of IbogaSoul Shamanic Healing. How did you discover the teachings of Elder Malidoma Somé? I hope I pronounced that right.
You did, thank you. The late Elder Malidoma Somé passed actually the same year my father did, and I came across him through my husband Mark, hearing one of Elder Malidoma's readings. He had this beautiful art of ancestral divination and his ability to connect on the other side and utilize a form of reading which includes shells and bones and stones and coins. But what really was the crux of it all was we had a miscarriage between my 8 and 3-year-old. And I fell into this deep state of listless abandon, I could call it. And I didn't know what to do. I had just had a reading with Elder Malidoma 2 days prior. And all he said was, I can just see, I can only read the baby. There's a man standing behind you, and he's got robes. His feet aren't touching the ground. And he's pointing forward as if pointing to your future. Now I know that that baby wasn't meant to be born until after my dad passed. It's all very beautiful and intertwined. So essentially, one of the most devastating experiences in my life led way for my ability to hold space for my own father to pass through that fire, wisdom that Elder Malidoma had shared with me. And so much, his books, Elder Malidoma has left 3 beautiful books. You can look them up and many YouTube videos. So I'm very grateful to carry forward his work in ancestral divination. Mhm.
So who was Elder Malidoma Somé?
Beautiful question. He was a man of his name. Malidoma means to make friends with the stranger or the enemy, a name that the shamans in his village channeled through his mother in the naming ritual while he was in utero. And his story is well documented in the book of Water and the Spirit, which I really advise anyone to read. And or if you can get the Audible book, it's actually his voice reading it, so you can learn all about him there. Beautiful soul. Mm-hmm.
Now, you do a process called ancestral divination. What exactly is ancestral divination?
Well, I should note that Elder Malidoma came from the Degara tradition of Burkina Faso, West Africa. So, in Elder Malidoma's experience, he was put into residential school and learned language and reading and writing. And after he was able to leave that experience in his life, reinitiate into his tradition and culture, he was taught the art of ancestral divination. Now, traditionally, it's only cowrie shells, which are right here on my beautiful headpiece made by my other friend. Hi, Heather. And they use the shells and they throw them on the sand and they read everything that the ancestors want them to know. But Malidoma understood that the Western mind has its limitations. So what he did was he actually translated it into, like I said, the bones and the shells and the stones on a mat that represent what can I say? The cosmology of life itself, how we can interpret each individual human's medicine for the world and help give guidance into that. So essentially, we open up the space by inviting the ancestors in. And there's a line of demarcation that Elder Malidoma created, which is essentially allows the reader, the diviner, to not read their own energy. So when person sits in front of me, or even on the video, which I learned through the world shutdown that I could even read, through the video by spinning the items for them, my divinee will ask a question, and I will ask the ancestors through spinning these items 3 times or 4 times, depending on the gender of a person, and then decipher what it is that the ancestors are sharing based on the question that the person has. And through the work of the plant medicines that I've had in my life, many. I've been able to sidestep what my mind is thinking and really tune in. I mean, so much of the work that you do, really tuning in and trusting my own intuition, pictures, words, names, items that come into mind. I'm able to just say it, without fear that I might be wrong, because that's how we keep those channels open, right?
So beautiful explanation. So, Robin Howard, you are a practitioner of ancestral divination. When people come to you, what sort of help are they looking for, or what sort of questions are they wanting asked answered?
Really great question. Sometimes people have recently lost a loved one and they desire to have a connection with them or receive messages of guidance and support. Other times, people might just be lost in life, kind of striving for finding a purpose, finding their path back into life, or really understanding relationships, career, health. There's nothing you really can't ask. As long as we trust the wisdom from our ancestors, then it's there. And I would like to also add that Elder Malidoma shared that, especially when we've had an ancestor who made poor choices or maybe even hurt people while they were alive, that those are actually the first people to call upon. Those are the ones who really have a deep sense of remorse when they cross over and they are waiting. He would always say, like, they're waiting for you to pick up the phone and call them because they can't really step into our lives until we give them permission and ask.
So, Robin Howard, as a practitioner of ancestral divination, what have you learned about our ancestors in doing this work?
I've learned that I'm never alone. I've learned that my ancestors always have my back. I like to call them my entourage. I've learned that I can give them tasks to help me. For example, I have three of my own naturally born children and one stepson. And sometimes I have fearful thoughts come in. What if I can't protect them? What if they go down, in a friend's car and whatever? What I have learned is that I can call on my ancestors, especially my dad, because I told him, I said, Dad, I'm going to put you to work. And he said, okay. Um, I can ask them for protection. And that really creates a level of calm and trust in my body so that I can come back to each present moment. Mhm.
Great explanation. Now, as you know, Robin Howard, many people practice something called mediumship. And when someone is a medium, then they act as an intuitive channel and channeling messages from those who have passed over. How does ancestral divination differ, or is it similar to the work of a medium?
I'd say there's a lot of similarities, most definitely. I happen to have extra tools at my disposal in front of me where I can reference. And sometimes a lot of people might have questions as like, how do you know that? Or how can you receive that information? And then I can begin to explain through the items and where they've fallen in each elemental quadrant on the graph to kind of help explain more to the linear mind. Mhm.
Yes.
But most definitely, I mean, we got this physical world and we got the spiritual world, and we're somewhere in between.
Yes. Now, of course, those of us in natural healing, there's definitely overlap in the work that we're all doing. And in my work, I do something called a 7 generation healing, and it's similar but different. And when I work with someone on a 7 generation healing, what we do is we have a question. It could be, how can I get pregnant? Or how can I overcome a health challenge? Or how can I resolve the money issues in my life? Or how can I overcome an addiction? And then you call on either the paternal line or the maternal line. So, for example, if I'm going back through the maternal line, I would ask the same question of my mother, my grandmother, my great grandmother, my great great grandmother, my great 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 grandmother. I'm laughing at all the greats, but
Mhm.
basically you go back 7 generations. And the basic concept of it is that um, as a human being, you have 50% of your DNA from your mom and 50% of your DNA from your dad. And then you have 25% of your DNA from each of your grandparents. 12.5% from each of your great grandparents, and so on. But when you go all the way back 7 generations, then you're going back to about, I believe, about roughly 1% of your DNA. And there's a beautiful saying that is, you are the result of the love of thousands. You
That's beautiful.
you are the result of the love of thousands. So I agree with you. Um, when we communicate with our ancestors, what we realize is that we are not alone. We're actually never alone. And we have these ancestors who have passed over who can help us.
That's so absolutely true. So many, like the beginning of time to Eden.
Yes.
May I please be excused? I'm hearing Baby Love Harmony cry, and I'll be right back.
Yes. And with
Thank you.
that, we will take a break and listen to a message from one of our commercial sponsors here at UK Health Radio. And we're listening to the lovely Robyn Howard, who is a soul influencer and the co-founder of IbogaSoul Shamanic Healing. We'll be right back. Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 best-selling author. I'm here today with Robyn Howard talking about ancestral healing. So in my own experience of doing these 7 generation balances healings over the years, again, I I'll have the person choose whether we go through the maternal line or the paternal line, and it's almost universal. Every time I do this kind of healing, the individual and I are literally listening to the ancestors. So I'm channeling messages from the ancestors, and so is the individual. And every single time I do it, the person that I'm helping inevitably cries, because when you realize how much love is all around you all the time, and that your ancestors have your back, then it's really uplifting. And Robyn Howard, you brought in a new guest on our show. Will you introduce our new guest?
Of course. This is Love Harmony Booyah Howard. It's quite a loaded name for a little soul, or huge soul in a little body. Yeah, she's 3 months old now.
Adorable. Okay, so we'll also be listening to Love Harmony.
Yeah,
So, Robyn Howard, you are the co-founder of IbogaSoul Shamanic Healing. How has working with plant medicines helped you in the connection to the other world?
great question. Well, it's helped me understand first and foremost who I am. I used to believe that I was a story, that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't lovable. Mm. And that came in so many nuanced actions. And at 19 years old, I'm 35 now, I was able to meet Iboga. And that was a beautiful medicine that brought the truth to my mind. Um, and in accordance with also the Bwiti tradition, a very, very beautiful spiritual tradition from Gabon, Africa, which is how I met my husband, Mark Howard, and how we have love harmony. Yeah, it helped me get out of my own way and receive what was my birthright, which is truth and connection to the other world.
So, Robyn Howard, as you know, there are different practitioners who work with the plant medicine Iboga, and Iboga is the strongest plant medicine in the world. Um, so, you and your husband, Mark Howard, work in the Bwiti spiritual tradition. How did you discover Iboga, and how did Iboga and the teachings of the Bwiti spiritual tradition help you personally?
Excuse me. At 18, my dad was very much sharing books like The Secret and What the Bleep Do We Know. I remember him saying, "You got to watch this." And at the time I did, and I was like, wow, that's kind of interesting, right? So I started to put into practice the law of attraction. And I was just very blessed at that time because I was working in a hair salon and I was just living joyful moments every day. So I was practicing the art of allowing without truly knowing it. And what that led to was one of my hair clients, leading me towards this medicine, essentially. It was really by saying yes to life and allowing. And what was the second part of that question?
So you and your husband, Mark Howard, do Iboga ceremonies using the Bwiti spiritual tradition. How did the Bwiti spiritual tradition help you personally?
Well, we share Bwiti inspired ceremonies. We can't go do a full Bwiti ceremony with IbogaSoul Shamanic healing because we'd need to be in the village. We'd need to have the entire support of the men, the women, the elders, the jungle itself, because we know that as Iboga is so powerful, there's so many other plant medicines in the jungle to help support physical healing, strengthening the body, detoxing, even prior to Iboga. And how Iboga has helped me is helped me heal my mind. It's helped me heal my relationship to the toxic thoughts that I absorbed from living and growing up as a young woman in Canada, in the Western world, let's say, where I'd never experienced what it really was like to have community. And I never really experienced anything other than like I call it the muggle world. Like Harry Potter, you're like the non-magical people. I didn't grow up with any religion. I didn't grow up with any sense of spirituality. So when Iboga and this truths from the Bwiti tradition danced into my life, I started to really pay attention. I started to pay attention to the signs in nature, to the signs within my own body, to the signs of like a book that might fall off the shelf. What it was it was called The Reluctant Shaman.
Mm.
It's an incredible story about a woman who was approached by two shamans that said, "We've been told by spirit that you're supposed to become the shaman that we train next." Anywho, it's helped me so much to pay attention to the signs that are all around, so I can navigate with my soul and not keep hitting walls with my mind and what I think is right. My soul will only and ever tell me the truth. And I see that. That's why I really lean into being an influencer of other people's souls, because that's how you're going to really get back to the truth of who you are and your purpose. So you can live a happy and aligned life.
Now, I know that all of us in natural healing are trained in different modalities. How did you and your husband, Mark Howard, train in the Bwiti tradition? Will you explain that for our audience?
hmm Well, it started with our own healing with Iboga, with a Bwiti shaman. And through that, we both decided on our own accord to continue training, which essentially was being present for many, many, many ceremonies that they were running. This was back in Costa Rica, gosh, 11 years ago, 12 years ago. So it's a lot of hands-on learning. It's a lot of witnessing people through their own journeys. There's something called the psychospiritual journey that we've both been trained, and it's a shamanistic way of leading somebody into the spiritual world while they're really with the medicine. And we've been trained on many tools and ways to understand if the medicine is done like cleaning the physical and the mental bodies, because nothing can enter the spiritual world if it's dirty. That's why that's why the spiritual world is pristine. It's divine. Humanity's egos haven't been able to go in and like mess shit up over there, right? So um, we guide them on a psychospiritual journey. And once again, I really want to circle back to it. It starts with our own personal healing and relationship with Iboga, as it is a spirit medicine. And as Bwiti is based in animism, where they understand that everything that's alive is animated by spirit. So I'd say it's a life path. It's a constant learning. It's a constant evolution, truly. And as we're starting to, or we have been working in the West for about 10 years, and Ibogaine is becoming more known for addiction interruption. It's a learning process. It's a growth process because we don't in the West live like they do in the villages down in Gabon, right? And that's kind of where my deep calling for creating community and helping people wake up to their own souls really comes from, because I want that for my children.
Now, for our audience, Iboga is the plant medicine, and the drug companies derive alkaloids from the Iboga plant and make a medicine called Ibogaine. So, Robin Howard, how do you think the recent Joe Rogan podcast speaking about Ibogaine treatment therapy will impact your work?
Well, I think we're all going to be very busy because there's a opioid crisis in the world, but there's also a crisis of anxiety, depression, purposelessness, distraction, so many addictions that we have. And what the medical and scientific community is starting to understand, and I highly recommend listening to this Joe Rogan podcast, it's wonderful, is that there's alternative natural methods that can really speed up the process of the neurogenesis of breaking the addiction patterns so that we can begin to really work on the soul level, right? Healing the mind so that we can bring the truth to people's lives. I do trust that our friends at Ambio, who were mentioned in the Joe Rogan podcast, um, funny enough, we're actually at our center in BC while it was going to be aired, doing a traditional ceremony with us. What a gift that we can continue to give. Because what happens with Ibogaine is that addicts become free of their addiction. And then they have much integration to do. And what we've done at IbogaSoul is welcome people who have done the Ibogaine detox. So they're coming in clean and they're able to do that deep work with the full Iboga root bark and the traditional spiritual counsel that we can provide, which really helps to make sense of this really beautiful, maybe sometimes visual, maybe more of a visceral knowing healing experience that Iboga offers. So I know we're going to be busy. I know we're going to be able to continue to support people who are on the path of healing. And I know a lot more people will be called to Iboga and Ibogaine from more media presence. Yeah.
And from your understanding, what's the main difference between the drug Ibogaine and the plant medicine Iboga?
Mm, great. So Iboga is the second layer of the root of the Iboga plant, Iboga tabernacle. And Tabernacle Iboga. And as I'm going to go deeper into this, so the total alkaloid extract is what removes all the plant matter from the actual root bark. Because when you're taking mouthful and mouthful and mouthful of root bark in Gabon, eventually it gets to a point that our Western palates, our bodies, actually, we can't even hold that much medicine in us, right? So what scientists have done is they've been able to extract the plant matter and leave the total alkaloid extract. Our first shaman taught us a way that we can maintain through ritual of extraction the spirit of the plant in the total alkaloid extract. Because we have to remember that we're working with a spiritual plant medicine. So it has it's physical, scientific compounds that we can study, we can isolate. And what the scientific community has done is they've isolated one active alkaloid from that compound of total alkaloid extract, TA for short, and that is ibogaine. Now, there's many active alkaloids in the plant, and every plant is different, like every human is different. So, the reason ibogaine, in my understanding, is utilized is because it's quantifiable. They can extract that one active alkaloid and then use it for very powerful addiction interruptions for opioid addicts. Mm-hmm. And the
Yes.
root bark, I'd like to say too, the root bark is beautiful for the psychospiritual journey experience. So that allows us to have a deep connection through our senses. When you eat that root bark, like any plant medicine, it's quite bitter. It doesn't taste good. Like I'm not going to serve it up for like a nice fancy dinner to anyone. It's bitter. It tastes like kind of battery acid with sawdust. It's dry when it comes over here. So but that's because it's medicine. And that's because we're not supposed to be taking medicines and medicines and medicines every day. We're supposed to, we can take it in a ceremony, honor that medicine, take its messages, and then go back into life straight sober and really enjoy life through our senses, right? Mm.
And with that, let's take another break and listen to a message from one of our commercial sponsors here at UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 bestselling author. We're listening to the beautiful and powerful Robyn Howard, soul influencer and co-founder of IbogaSoul Shamanic Healing. We'll be right back. Robyn Howard, earlier in our interview, you talked about the psycho-spiritual journey. What exactly is a psycho-spiritual journey, and how can that empower our healing process?
A great question. A psychospiritual journey is a way for us to guide a person and reunite them with their soul. And many times when we're doing this work, I might bring someone to find their soul, and they might not be able to find them. We usually go back to their bedroom, the place where you spend the most time through your sleep. And unfortunately, a lot of times the soul is hiding from the person, or they're angry, or in my particular case, when I was 19, I learned that my soul felt betrayed by me. And I remember that moment where I realized exactly why she would feel betrayed, because I would live vicariously through my life and not ever listen to the intuitive hunches that I got. So the psychospiritual journey is a way to really find the truth of what's going on within you so that you can decide to make better choices moving forward for your own self. I feel it's like niggle in my heart of joy speaking about the soul, because I do trust that every single person on this planet has a beautiful soul, has a beautiful soul that wants to be listened to and talked to, even. The psychospiritual is a way for me to and our team to bring people back to the truth of who they are and make amends with themselves. And sometimes that has to come in the form of apologizing to themselves for being dishonest or hurting themselves through drugs or alcohol or through, copious relationships, whatever it is. But that puts the power back in the person's hands. When you can be in totality of your body, mind, and soul, and then lead your life from there, magic can happen.
So, Robyn Howard, your job title is soul influencer. Why is it so important for us, in your opinion, to actually listen to our soul?
Well, that's the truth of who you are. Yeah. Our mind is a wonderful supercomputer. I like to look at it like that. It processes information and it sends information out. But who's the one receiving it and who's the one putting the impetus out there? I trust that it is my soul. I I remember in an Iboga journey once, it was right after my first son was born, and I was sitting and working, and I had taken some medicine to connect with the spirit. And I looked up and I saw it looked like a tapestry of cogs, and they were all like twisting in the beautiful union synergy with the medicine's music that we were playing. And I realized that every single soul, every single human being is a part of this puzzle, this intricate weaving of life. And I want to receive each person's soul medicine instead of their ego that might be inflated or might have pain and trauma where people can act from. That's where I think a lot of all war is started, by people living instead of from their soul self, but from their mind, the pain, the trauma, constant making the same, like, what is that? Insanity, doing the same thing over and over from the mind, from the mind, from the mind. What if we sat back into our soul? What kind of a world could we create there? You know, that's why I'd like to influence souls to wake up, get out of their own way, because this is also the thing. The mind doesn't want to be in control. You know, it's kind of like I take messages, I'm a little go-to, right? The soul is the one who's here to be in charge.
So, we started this interview by talking about ancestral divination. How do the messages we receive from our ancestors sometimes differ from the messages we might receive from our soul?
Great question. Um, well, it's a dialogue. So when I speak to my ancestors, it's as if they respond in ways that can highlight areas that I might be missing. Because I like to look at, I have my friends, I have my family in this physical world, and I have my friends and my family in the ancestral world. And if I can lean into myself so much, that's wonderful. But I'm not alone here. So it's interesting. It's a process. It's a testing and receiving and then putting into action. And I think for every single person listening here, that's what life's about. It's about testing it out. It's about trial and error. It's about going with your gut hunches. And if you receive something and you act on it and it works out, great. If you receive something and you act on it and it doesn't work out, what lesson can we learn from it? I think that's what my ancestors and all of our ancestors want us to do is learn and grow. And they'll always answer, in my understanding, when I ask for help, when I give them tasks to help protect myself, my children, my family, all my relations. But, truth is truth, you know? So I don't know if I can fully decipher my soul and my ancestors. That's a really great question. I'm going to sit with that.
Now, Robyn Howard, you've created a new women's gathering called Mothership. Tell us about your new women's gathering called Mothership and the vision and what prompted its inception.
Thank you. Well, since Love Harmony Booyah was born, I felt a little bit isolated at home and have my other children and our business. And my therapist suggested that I just pull together some women and do like a weekly, bi-weekly group. So we've done that. And I was so grateful when you joined. Mothership is evolving into a place where women, mothers, feminine energy, we're going to gather bi-weekly online and meditate together, dance together, connect on a community because I really want to help influence the souls of all these beautiful women across the planet to step into the truth of who they really are so that we can, like I say, drive this mothership to the ground, really ground ourselves to the point where we're so connected with the earth that, yeah, maybe there's strives to go to Mars, maybe there's alien beings or consciousness coming to earth. My question is, who are we and how do we want to be? And that's kind of where mothership is evolving into. But it did start with my feeling isolated. And my deep soul's medicine is building community and being the glue that pulls people together to be in union. So it's evolving. And anyone who goes to my personal website, soullove.ca, sign up to our email list, and we'll send invite links for all of the mothership community gatherings. So it's like it's for me to create a better world for my daughter and all the daughters on this planet.
A beautiful intention. So, as you know, it seems that, and I'm making a broad general statement here, but it seems that it's easier for women to get in touch with their intuition oftentimes than men. In your experience, why is it easier for women to listen to their intuitive guidance?
Hmm. Well, there's a reason we call our planet Mother Earth. There's a reason women are the ones who birth the next generations of humans. I do trust that innately women have a deep connection to our intuition, to our souls, that we're guided by the phases and the cycles of the moon. This meditation series that I'm putting out, this lunar phase, it's been incredibly impactful. And I've also received incredible feedback from men. So I think it comes back to tuning into the lineages that we come from, to the grandmothers, to the grandfathers, right? I think that women can be incredibly logical and take on a lot of male qualities, and I think that men can do the same. But if it is your birthright coming into this world as a woman, then follow that. Don't shy away from being a woman and being your soul self because you're powerful and you're beautiful and you have so much gifts waiting to be uncovered. Mhm.
Now, Robin Howard, when we talk about ancestral divination, you mentioned that you use a number of tools. Here at the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio, I interviewed a woman who's created a system of divination using seashells. What tools do you use in ancestral divination?
Well, Elder Malidoma had given my group a list of items to collect. So it's a lot of cowrie shells, a lot of coins, a lot of items that represent, in his way of reading, a dialogue. So I have a little doll that represents the divinity, the person I'm reading. I have a stone that represents the institution, their work. I have a stone that represents their style of delivery of their own medicine, their own unique medicine. So in a way, what I'm doing, what Elder Malidoma taught me, and my fellow colleagues, excuse me, colleagues that do ancestral divination across the globe, is that it's a language, it's a story, and it really does help my mind that is attuned to reading and deciphering through words and story to be able to look at my grid, see in relation to the question that my client is asking how their ancestors have responded. And I always start with the ancestral stone. It's like number one. Okay, your ancestors are saying this, and we like kind of circle around to see what's going on. That in alignment with tuning into my intuition and not shying away from feeling like I might say the wrong thing. Um, it's an incredible gift to be able to open a portal to someone's ancestors. And that being said, too, in the work that Elder Malidoma taught me, he shared how to prescribe rituals. He would call them ritual prescriptions. And this is wonderful because I really like to give the power to each person, allow their soul, their mind, their body to take impetus into their life, which is something as simple as potentially setting up an ancestral altar in their home, having a few photos of loved ones who have passed. A simple little cup of water represents the pool of all their ancestors, all those great, 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 greats, right? And a candle. And if we can do something as simple as that ritual prescription, it offers an opportunity for a person to have a sacred altar in their home and begin the dialogue, right? So many wonderful ways that we can take our own power back. And another thing that I loved about Elder Malidoma was he said, there's no wrong way that you can do a ritual when you're coming from a purity of heart. And you go out and you offer some sugar to the tree. Great. Something as simple as that can really bring you back in alignment with the essence of who we really are.
So, Robin Howard, as you listen to the messages of the ancestors with the various clients that you've been working with, what are some of the common messages that you're hearing from the ancestors at this time?
Well, the main to do is they have our back. They want to help us, right? That they're fired up for the person's journey and waking up. A lot of the times, somebody's sitting across from me. Typically, at a IbogaSoul retreat, I read for everybody. It helps them hone in on their intention for going into the medicine. So it's a beautiful practice. But I would say across the board, everyone's ancestors are there to support them no matter what they've done, and especially if they have a aversion to connecting with their ancestors. They really want to have that connection. Yeah.
And you mentioned that sometimes the people that in this lifetime we may have had a challenge with, once they cross over into the other world, then they want to help us. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's as if, oh gosh, I remember hearing Danny and Brinkley, this incredible person who's had four near death experiences rather. And he said every time he went over to the other side, they would show him all the times that he was, hurting something, whether it was like stepping on a bug or like ripping a leaf, or of course, interactions with humans. And he had this deep, like the deepest sense of remorse in his heart because he would experience it from his perspective and from the other. So being the ant that's being stepped on and all the remorse from all that. So by this fourth near-death experience, he said the area that he had to be shown was very short. because he had lived, he found a way to like find forgiveness in his heart for the remorse, right? So when our ancestors have passed over and they're able to see how much pain they might have inflicted through their actions, through how they were, through their words, through carrying their own ancestral trauma forward, it's as if they have a deep, deep desire to help heal the reverberating ripples in the ocean of life itself that they're, the forerunners of their lineage, us, are still holding on to. Does that make sense? I feel like I went on a big thing there. But it's as if, yeah, they just want to help us, right?
Very powerful message. Robyn Howard, soul influencer and co-founder of IbogaSoul Shamanic Healing. Any final thoughts for our audience?
Not a thought, but a sensation. I would invite everyone to take a deep breath and focus on your heart and feel the joy and the love and the unity that we all share together through our own souls in the spirit of life itself.
Beautiful message. You've been listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 best-selling author. Our guest today has been Robyn Howard, soul influencer and co-founder of IbogaSoul Shamanic Healing. You can find out more about Robyn Howard and her wonderful work at soullove.ca and ibogasoul.com. And remember, you are the result of the love of thousands. And when you take the time to connect to your ancestors, you can receive healing naturally. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.